All right, guys, and welcome to Wednesday's edition of 10% Fitter Method Show. Today, on all Wednesdays, we focus on nutrition. And today, we're going to be specifically talking about some diet do's and don'ts that are focused around fats and carbohydrates. Now, remember, guys, with me, whenever you learn from me, you have to understand because I've been coaching for a long time, I don't give you, here's the method for you. Why? Because I don't know you. I don't know who I'm talking to. I don't know who's listening out there. And for that reason, I have to approach it from a standpoint of showing you options of all different things you could do and teaching you how to apply them to specific scenarios, because it's not just a cookie cutter approach where there's one size fits all. That's really not how our body works. And people that like myself been doing this for a long time, we know that that is the case. We know that we can't just say here's how this works and go do about it. So let's cover what we're going to dive into today with a little bit of an agenda. So starting out, we'll discuss what makes fat bad and good, right? What are good fats? What are bad fats? Or is fat necessarily all bad? Who knows? Or is it all good? We'll talk about balancing your fats. Now, with that, I'll talk about this in a sec, but just understand, it depends on your level of readiness. A lot of the times I talk about many different levels of application, and there's clients that are basically just newbies. They're just trying to consider shifting their nutrition. They may understand only the basics of what a fat, a carbohydrate, a protein is. They may not even know anything beyond that, and some may not even know what that is. They're just trying to eat healthy. For those people, some of this information is probably even too much. Take the basic concepts and start running with them. But for some of you that have a little bit more information, more knowledge, you're like a level 2 client. There's also level 3 clients, and I work with all different types. So just know, like some of these concepts, like balancing your fats, if you're just not eating healthy right now, don't worry about balancing your fats. Making sure you're getting enough and the right amount of total fat versus looking at specific ratios of those individual fats. So if you guys are just joining me, my name's Anton. I'm a health coach. I'm a founder of 10% Fitter Method. It's a solution for health coaching and life coaching that basically centers health and life together and brings it on in a habitual way that only focuses on creating small, subtle changes each week that are habitual. So that's everything I teach in my show. And 10% Fitter is focused on mindset. It's focused on internal health. It's focused on nutrition and exercise. All four have to be addressed in order to get the person to be as good as they can be. That's really what it's about. I want you to be feeling as good as you can all the time. So then we'll talk about what makes carbs good and bad, right? We'll talk about what is glycemic index, because that's one of the things that I look at when I'm choosing my carbohydrates. I want to help you there a little bit as well. And then dangers of low carb. Everybody's kind of gotten caught on that carbohydrates are, potentially making us fat. It's not always the case, but there's dangers that are associated with this overly popular keto diet. Women, especially for you, so stay tuned. We'll talk about why that is important down the road and why that can wreak havoc on your body if you're not paying attention to things. So that's really going to be today's focus. So starting out first, right, what makes fat good and bad is what we're kind of looking at. So when we're looking at good and bad fats, we have to really look at it from a very simplistic standpoint first. And that has to do with, are they naturally occurring? Such as you're going to find fat in your olives, your nuts, your seeds, or are they, not naturally occurring? So even then, like when good fats, what are the good fats? So it means that they're naturally occurring and they're also relatively minimally processed. So that means that they're either whole foods or they've been just pressed or ground, right? So like a perfect example of almond butter. Almond butter is a perfectly healthy fat to have. Be careful with fats because they're high in calories, but that's not necessarily the biggest priority point for somebody shifting their diet initially. So almond butter is just ground up and made into this paste that then we eat. You don't have to add chemicals to it. You don't have to do anything to it. You don't have to work it in a plant to put stuff in it. It's naturally processed. So these are the kind of fats that keep your hormones healthy. They help your brain to be happy because our brain needs a lot of fat in order to perform as well as it should. And it helps your fatty tissue, like your eyes, your skin, to be kind of well lubed and your body chemistry working as it should. I've covered this in the past that eating too low fat is a big deal because your body uses that fat to produce hormones. So if you don't give your body enough building blocks, your body doesn't have enough hormones, and that creates problems. Plus, fat tastes good. Avocados, nut butter, coconut, a little bit of dark chocolate, all that stuff is a form of great natural healthy fats. Now, is a meat a bad fat for you? Not necessarily. If you have good digestion, everything's good for you, there's no problem with eating meat. There's been a lot of bad research out there that makes red meat be bad. Are there certain components that you can represent about it? Sure. But if you're eating clean meat that is naturally and organically raised in humane ways, not in cages shoved full of hormones, it's not going to be a big problem. So guys, if you're just joining me, we're talking about fats and carbohydrates today. Chime in, let me know where you guys are from in the comments. I'd love to see where listeners are tuning in from, and always just feel free to ask questions. Chime in with those questions and let me kind of know what could be on your mind as far as you're concerned with healthy fats and carbohydrates. So then looking, what is the other side? What makes fats unhealthy? Like, how do we determine if a fat is healthy or unhealthy? We talked about some healthy options now, but what makes a fat unhealthy? So these are the fats you should eat less of. Now, always remember, when I preach nutrition, I preach anything to do with 10% fitter method. It's an 80-20 rule. You're good most of the time, and then sometimes you're not good, and you give yourself a break. And that's how you can do most of the time be good, if you give yourself a break with those few cheat meals, cheat days, or just not even always having to be preoccupied with this stuff. If you make changes how I teach you, I promise you, if you just watch the show, you will learn. You will have the right diet. It doesn't have to feel like work, because it's not about dieting. I don't believe in diets. I believe in healthy nutritional plans and habits that lead to good outcomes. But anyway, so just like the opposite of healthy fats, unhealthy fats don't naturally occur in the foods they're found in, right? So they have to be created through an industrial process. So those are going to be your like trans fats. The worst thing out there is your transitional fats, created in an industrial process that forces hydrogens into vegetable seed oils and makes them more solid, right? That's what they do with it. So look for them as partially hydrogenated and or vegetable shortening. You see those things, don't eat them. And even when you see 0 grams trans fat, this is a big one, guys. You see 0 grams trans fat doesn't mean it has no trans fat, and that's not necessarily. FDA allows companies to round down. So if there's less than half a gram of trans fat per serving, then your body, they don't have to report it, they can put 0. But if you had a few servings of that, now you've gotten a few grams of trans fat, and that's a bad thing. It can really wreak havoc on your body. So what kind of foods contain trans fats? Those are going to be your like margarines, your processed oils such as cooking sprays, right? It's convenient. Guys, the more convenient nutrition is, chances are the worse it is for you. We are a microwave society. That's what I call us, where we want everything quick, everything easy, and that's why we're eating like crap. We just don't know how to eat well anymore. We think it's complicated, but we just don't practice it. And when you start doing little changes and little adjustments, it becomes much easier. So guys, if you're just joining, let me know where you're joining from. We're talking about do's and don'ts of fats today and carbohydrates, and just talking about some sources and different things like that, and just creating education around it. So regular peanut butter usually has some trans fats, the regular kind, like your Skippy and like those regular like store-bought brands, not organic. Fried or battered foods are usually going to have them because that oil is going to have it in it. Your pie crusts, other baked goods typically have them unless they've been made in like a specific way. Your frozen dinners usually will sneak some in there and stuff like that, and just other processed foods. Like, it's crazy. I was listening to this doctor talk about this. Is like, why is it that our body wants trans fat when we had a little bit? Like, you can't just eat one Oreo cookie. Like, it's like impossible. What happens is a lot of them are not complete fats. So our body starts to search to complete the fat. It thinks it needs to get more of that food in to complete the fat profile to use it how it should. So it gets asked for more and more and more, but it never actually gets it. Many other reasons why, but that's one of the interesting reasons. It's like, oh wow, that's pretty crazy to think about. So some foods such as like dairy and beef contain naturally occurring trans fats. These naturally occurring trans fats don't seem to be the problem because they're more naturally occurring. So in some research suggests they may actually be good for us. It's more the man-made fats that are really the problem. So basically what you want to look at, industrial vegetables and seed oils, like avoid those. Like your corn oils, your cottonseed, safflower, soybean, and sunflower oils, they're like so not good for you. So then from there, we got to look at balancing your fats. Like I mentioned to you, if you're kind of a higher level knowledge with nutrition, or more importantly, not even knowledge, but higher level of application. You actually practice somewhat good eating habits, and you're ready to start to balance your fats. You want to make sure that you're keeping all three main sources of healthy fats in balance, meaning that you don't eat too much of one and not enough of the other. So the three main ones that you kind of have are going to be, one, saturated fats. That's what we're very familiar with, and for the longest time, this has been an issue because doctors said that saturated fats cause high cholesterol. That study's been refuted from the 50s many years ago. It's not necessarily the case. Your dietary intake of saturated fats has little to do with your cholesterol. It does impact it a little bit, but the amount is very small. It's really the high carbs and being overweight and all these other things that cause a problem. Lots of saturated fats with carbs is bad. I talked about that yesterday. Don't pair a high carb meal with a high fat meal. That's not going to be a good thing. But if you had a high fat meal with a low carb meal, that's fine. Or a moderate of both is fine. Or a higher carb, lower fat is fine, right? But just in moderate proportion. So your saturated fats are going to be things like your egg yolks, right? That's a very common one. People like, oh, don't eat egg yolks, they're bad for you. One of the most nutritious things you can have is an egg yolk. Like, it has so many amazing nutrients in it. Now, it's high calorie, so maybe we need to mix it in with a little bit of, whites and egg and yolks, so not as many yolks as there is as whites, because we can get a lot of protein from the whites, not with a ton of calories, where we get a ton of good things from the yolks, but because they're fats, they're higher calories. High-fat dairy, your cacao, your chocolate, things like that, your animal fats, but don't be afraid of them. Like that T-bone steak, but you eat them in moderation, nothing bad for you. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to cause you heart disease. There's a lot of good things in it as long as it's raised naturally, organically, and humanely. So you have one side is saturated. Then you have your monounsaturated fats. So these are going to be things like nuts, peanuts, avocados, olives, olive oil. They're all just kind of plant-based fats. And then other sources of fats are going to be your polyunsaturated. Just the way that a molecule is set up internally. I'm not going to get into science of that and bore you, but your sources of polyunsaturated fats are going to be like flax, chia, nut seeds, but also some like fatty fish will have it, cold pressed seed oils, pumpkin seed, hemp seed, things like that will have a lot of polyunsaturated fats. So try to keep those in balance. Now, if you're eating like crap right now, worrying about balancing those three is not the level that you need to be on. You just need to try to get the right amount of fats in your diet. So when we talk about fats, usually what I say for a woman, look at a plate. When you're looking at your plate, how much fat do you need? For a woman, about a thumb worth, right? About that much of fat is what you need. It's not a precise measurement. You need to count calories. You need to weigh everything. It's not that simple. I'll explain in one of the future articles. If you look at calorie counting article on my page, I think it's like 2 back, I break down why calorie counting is not accurate, why we don't need to do that now until a certain level. And read the article, you can see it. But if you're not there where you're doing all these things, just worry about a good amount of fat versus balancing them. If you're already eating well, now balance your fats. It's the next step. I always talk about this. You don't walk into a gym on day one, pick up 300 pounds and throw it over your head, right? There's a lot of things that have to happen in between that in order to be able to get to that level. You understand that. But for some reason with nutrition, we don't apply that knowledge. We think that, you know what? I'm going to go from a crappy diet right now to now I'm going to be perfect. Well, it lasts for a week, 2 or 3, and then we fall off because we don't address habits. We don't address root causes. We don't create habitual change that's gradual and slow. We try to do a sprint, not a marathon. So don't focus on that. So kind of talked about your fats, good, bad, things like that. So then what makes a carb bad and good, right? Let's kind of dive into that. And it has a lot to do with the complexity of the carbohydrate. Not all carbs are created equal, just like not all fats are created equal. So when you look at processed carbohydrates versus unprocessed carbohydrates, this is one of the biggest areas to look at. Has that carbohydrate gone through some sort of a process to break it down? What would be an example of that? Bread. I'm like thinking about fat still. Bread has had to be made into a flour, ground up, processed, especially with all the modern breads that have been bleached flour and all the chemicals they add into it to preserve it. Like if your bread can sit on a shelf for a couple weeks and not dry out, that's a problem, guys. Like if you made fresh bread, like you cooked it yourself, it will not sit there for 2 weeks because it's not full of preservatives. So if you must have bread, try to have more natural bread, something that has less crap in it, less preservatives. But once again, at what level of nutrition are you at is what you apply. Now, what are better carbs, right? Naturally occurring carbs, your grains, your potatoes, different things like that. And this is where people are like, whoa, Anton, what do you mean? You telling me I should eat potatoes? What if I want to lose weight? And I'm like, okay, here's the thing. What if you're eating donuts all the time right now, and we take you away from a donut to a potato? Or what if you're eating, something that's just very sugary, lots of bread, and we switch you from that to a potato? We went from a non-processed food from a processed food to a non-processed food. You're winning. That's going to create change in your body. You don't have to go 0 to 100. Create subtle changes. Like if you're drinking a lot of soda right now and you're trying to lose weight, don't try to eat perfect. Just ditch the soda first. Make that be your one habit that you focus on for 2 weeks. And I've seen people lose tens of pounds by just ditching the habit because they were doing so much of it. It was putting them in such a caloric increase, plus screwing up their insulin and all internal stuff that soda does. So just understand level of change that you need to apply to create the desired outcome that you need. I look at kind of that minimal viable product. What is that minimum amount that we can do that creates the biggest difference? Because then that's what 10% Fitter is about. It's look at all of your inputs, all the different things you're doing good, all the different things you're doing bad. How can we do more good and how can we do less bad by focusing on a singular thing that creates the biggest impact, because we're going at the root cause, right? So carbohydrates processing, right? That is the first thing you want to look at. So before you even worry about should I eat a white rice or a brown rice, like people get into this conversation all the time. I'm seeing a person going from a completely unhealthy diet to now they're worried about white rice or brown rice. I'm like, no, that's not what you should be worried about. Can we worry about meal frequency first? Can we worry about, quantities and stuff like that, ballparking your food before we're getting that specific? You have to get consistent before you get specific. That's the message with 10% Fitter that I send all the time. Whether you're doing gym, whether you're doing health, internal health, mindset, you have to first get consistent in generalities before you bring that into specific things. That's how habits are built. So that's kind of good and bad carbohydrates. You have your bad ones that are going to be processed and good ones that are going to be not processed. Now, if we look at the cleanest carbs of them all, I'm talking about that gold standard, right? That shiny seal on that carbohydrate that tells you eat meat. Those are going to be your ancient grains. There's a few of them out there, but the two that I really go to are buckwheat and quinoa. Those are some of my favorites. They take a lot to break down for the body, so the body has to work a lot. It doesn't just create a blood sugar spike right away, and we can't use that all that energy and stuff like that. So those are very popular. They haven't been really messed with by our agriculture, because our agriculture's kind of screwed up a lot of our grains, put a lot of phytonutrients or bad nutrients in them and anti-nutrients and gluten. Our gluten is so much higher than it ever used to be. So all of those are kind of good ones. Now, what is glycemic index? This is something that a lot of people talk about when it comes down to carbohydrates. Glycemic index. Basically, you can look it up for most foods and most carbohydrates, and it'll tell you how much will it spike your blood sugar. So that's another one of those levels that I look at when understanding what is a good carb and what is not a good carb. And that has to do with how much it spikes our blood sugar, and it has to do with simplicity of it, and also how much fiber and how much of it is actually broken down and not. So like a high glycemic index, donut, lots of sugar, lots of things like that. Low glycemic index, quinoa, right? That would be an example of that. So you need to just not look at total calories. A lot of times we look at total calories and we think that's the best way to determine a carbohydrate. It's not. It's what is your body going to do with those calories? If they're going to quickly become available and there's too much of them, so now we have to take excess, store it as fat for later utilization, right? So hey guys, if you're just joining, we're just talking about do's and don'ts of understanding fats and carbohydrates. We've talked about what makes fat bad and good. We talked about balancing your fats if you're on that level. We've discussed what makes carbs bad and good. And now we're talking about glycemic index, and then we'll talk about dangers of carbs. Low carbs, I should say. So if you guys just hit the like button and let me know where you're from, I'd really appreciate it. I love seeing where people are listening from. Just kind of gives me an idea where my audience is at. But now moving on to dangers of low carbs. That's something that often we forget about because this keto diet has become popular. But the thing is, a lot of times we do research and it's really observational research. So a person says, you know what, I feel great on keto diet. What is great? Great is a relevant term. Now, I'm not saying keto diets are bad. So before everybody starts going after me and getting mad, I don't believe keto diet is sustainable. I don't believe any diet is sustainable. I believe teaching people gradual change to make their nutrition, not diet, be automatic because they now made the shift properly. But what are we getting into with low carb diets? So some things that you have to understand is that carbs, Yes, you can survive without them. That's what keto practitioners will tell you. Your body will switch to ketones and feed itself on that. But it's not optimal, especially if you need to perform, especially if you want to have good physique. Now, this is where a lot of people will bring me up pictures of people on keto and like, look at this person. They were able to achieve it. They're an anomaly. They're in 1% of the population that puts so much time into their health and everything's perfect. For an average person, it won't work. For an average person, having some carbohydrates for their level of fitness is much better for their muscle mass, amongst other things. So, do carbs increase insulin levels? Yes, they do, but does increased insulin levels always mean that it's going to cause fat gain? Not necessarily. It's how much we overeat those carbs. Insulin is actually a satiety hormone. It tells us we're full, and it also builds muscles. It helps us to build muscle and create anabolic hormones. So it's an important thing to focus on. Are carbs really inflammatory? That's another thing that people kind of put bad about carbohydrates. You create a lot of anti-nutrients and a lot of basically byproducts that are free radicals that are not good. And is that true? It can if you're eating donuts, if you're eating corn syrup, if you're eating bad carbohydrates that are highly processed and man-made, but not from naturally occurring carbohydrates. That's really not the bad thing. So, do you have to be low carb to lose weight? No, not necessarily. That's not true. So, what is the problem with eating low carbs? One of the things is your thyroid. That is one of the things that, oh, hey, Tina, thanks for chiming in from Texas. That's cool. One of the things, women and low carb diets, God, I don't know how many times I've had to pull them off of it. But what it does is slows down your T3 thyroid function. And that has to do with your energy production. It has to do with your metabolism. It has to do with your ability to burn fat. It has all these components. When your carbohydrates go down, you have a decreased thyroid output, and you have an increased cortisol output. This is why thyroid and stress have an inverse function. That basically, when your stress goes up, your thyroid goes down. So people with thyroid problems, if you're not managing your stress, that's a big thing. We can help you manage your medication, even if you're on medication, and get it better and work for you better by managing your stress. Sometimes we can even get off medications if it's not an autoimmune disease. So the other thing that it does is it decreases testosterone. Guys, testosterone pretty important. Women, same thing. It impairs your mood and cognitive function when you're low carbohydrate because our brain needs more carbs for energy. Now, this is where people say your brain can eat ketones. Yes. But once again, I come back to optimal versus okay. And a lot of these people that are on keto, they're feeling okay, but I don't want you to be okay. I want you to be great. I want you to be amazing. I want you to be as good as you possibly can be. And that's why I don't believe in diets. The other thing that they do is they create muscle catabolism. If you don't eat enough carbohydrates, very often our body tries to break down muscle to fuel itself and get glycogen that way, especially for too low calorie at the same time as low carb. Suppressed immune function because our cortisol is not being regulated properly because of it. And now it plays a factor in immunity, and that throws off our immunity. So understand that it's not just that simple about, carbs are bad, carbs are good. You have to understand there's a lot of complexities that go into it. And you really have to understand that your HPA axis, which has to do with your, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis that exists in your body, it is impacted by low carb. So make sure that you're not doing things like that. Women, low carb can cause your reproductive function to go down because your luteinizing hormone, follicular stimulating hormone, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, all those hormones will be impacted by low carbohydrates. I often had to, increase bodybuilders and make them gain fat and add some carbohydrates into their diet to get them to be able to reproduce. So that's very typically something that happens. So guys, understand carbs are not that simple. It's not just about, eat them, don't eat them, what's good, what's not good, and things like that. Jeremy, let's see what you got for a question. What would you recommend if a person is not able to use a sugar substitutes besides honey? I can't really open the comment fully. I don't know why it doesn't let me do that. I'm just trying to read your full comment, brother, and see what you're saying. Honey, I think it's, there it is. Besides honey to help their health. I need to understand why you can't use a sugar substitute. What have you tried? What are you doing, man? Type it in the comment right now for me what that is. Have you tried stevia? Have you tried the natural ones? And things like that. The other part is, what do you need sugar for? What are we putting this into? I got to have a little bit more context, man, to be able to respond. But ultimately, one of the things that we do, we have to retrain your taste buds. taste buds are retrainable. You know, if you eat a ton of sugar right now, you don't really feel the flavor as much. Your body's just searching for that sugar. But when you kind of go 30 days without sugar, you start eating food again, you notice the fruit tastes better, the veggies taste better, the foods that you already eat taste better. So we got to cut back on it ultimately and do like a 30-day sugar detox and then see if you still need it. If you still need it, like I said, have you tried stevia? Because it's strange for me why you would be able to use honey but not stevia. Now, sucralose and all those other fake sweeteners, yeah, that's bad. Like, you don't do that by any means, but natural ones, there's a few out there that maybe you need to try. So if you haven't, let me know, man. I know, Jeremy, we got a call coming up. We can chat about that, I think on the 5th tomorrow, so we can get into more detail, but I appreciate the question, man. Guys, feel free to ask more questions, as they come up. Tomorrow, we're going to spend time on exercise, and I'm going to talk to you really about the difference, what a program is and what a workout is. Because most of you are working out. Most of you are not doing programs because we just come in and we think it's about burning calories. And it's not. There's so many components to a workout program. We're trying to fix a specific thing in your body while we can burn some calories. So you can burn calories and not achieve anything else in your body, or you can achieve what you need in your body and burn calories at the same time. So we'll talk about that tomorrow, 9 a.m., same time, same place. Guys, I appreciate everybody that tunes in. Guys, I lose probably at least 50 followers every time I go live. That's pretty sad, right? For some of you that have tuned in and watched this show, like, am I really bugging people that much by giving away free information on health? But because people see that notification pop up, they get annoyed. And then it's sad because I'm like, here I am trying to help the world by educating around health and showing the bigger picture of health for free. And people are upset that they get a little notification about it. That's how sad our environment is. That's what stress does to people. It creates envy, it creates judgment, it creates all these negative feelings that cause people to do that. Now, do you think I didn't have those feelings when I didn't have live and a little bit of envy? I had that feeling come in. But the human in me overtook the animal in me, and logic kicked in and said, it's not those people's fault that I don't have live and they do. Or it's not those people's fault that they LinkedIn shows a notification. I didn't elect that. Like, don't punish the person for trying to do good. But so I appreciate every one of you guys for tuning in, and that just means the world to me. Because if I didn't see anybody on the show, of course I wouldn't do it, because I don't have listeners and I want to just talk to myself. But I see people tuning in every single week, and it gives me hope that there's people out there that are truly wanting to get better with their health, and not just from a standpoint of here's how I did it. People that want to learn a 30,000-foot view of the health world, of that seeing the forest view versus being caught up with the individual tree. By the way, I have a link in there for a webinar. I'm doing a webinar on September 11th, guys. There's very few things in life that I'm extremely good at. That I say I'm an average person in many different ways, but understanding. Yeah, Jeremy, yeah, so Nutria and all those things are not necessarily natural. Try stevia. Have you tried stevia in particular? Like, stevia is a naturally occurring thing. It's nothing new to it, and actually sweeter than sugar when you look at it per gram. But, and like I said, we can talk about that. But, guys, so keep tuning in. I appreciate every single one of you, and I'll keep educating you. But with my webinar, I'm pretty good through questions assessing people's health and being able to open your eyes to some things that are just you've never seen before. You never connected this feeling, this negative response to the internal health marker. So what I'll do is I'll take you through a questionnaire. I'll ask you a bunch of different questions, and you will have a copy in front of yourself filled out. And I will break down every question on the webinar so you can score yourself. You can see what's going on. Guys, it'll blow your mind. I literally given away 100 spots. I don't have 80 filled up right now. Let's shake my head because I'm a terrible marketer. So if you know anybody out there that would benefit, guys, come listen. There's so few things that I say highly about myself. I will blow your freaking mind. You will not believe the information you're going to find out. So please don't let me speak to 1 or 2 people for free. Let me speak to 100 people and fill up every spot that Zoom webinars allow me to do. So the link is in the notes of the show today, and go ahead and register. If you guys ever need a consultation, I give away free consultations as well, so I can give you an idea. Knowledge is always free. It's application that if you need that I charge and I work with. So link is in my profile under contact info. Grab that. And then other than that, that's really all I have for you guys today. So thanks for tuning in from Texas, and Jeremy on the East Coast somewhere, I think you are, and whoever else was on. I appreciate you all. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day.